Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and my law firm assists nurse practitioners with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today I'm going to talk about the number one reason why nurse practitioners are fired from private practices. So, depending upon what state you're in, you could either be employed with a physician-owned practice, or perhaps if you are in a state where NPs are autonomous, then you could also be an employee of a nurse practitioner-owned practice as well. So this is going to apply to kind of either of those situations. The number one reason why nurse practitioners are fired are lack of productivity from the eyes of the owner of the practice. So how do we identify what is the productivity expectation, and then how to make sure that you're hitting it are kind of the goal of this video today. So first, when you are interviewing for a practice, you absolutely need to figure out what is the productivity expectation, and practices can measure that in different ways. So they could measure it in encounters per day. They can measure it in RVUs. They can measure it in net collections, so how much money the practice brings in based upon your personally performed services. Those are probably the three main ways that a practice would gauge the productivity of an employed nurse practitioner. So encounters per day, net collections, RVUs. Now, what type of contract you have and how your compensation is calculated is very likely going to show you how the practice determines productivity. So if you're just paid a straight base salary, no productivity incentives, no mention of how many patients you have to see or anything like that, that's when you absolutely need to identify before you sign the contract, what is considered above average productivity for me. And then they can get into, all right, this is what matters to us. And that way all right, they expect me to see 25 patients a day. Or they expect me to collect, $30,000 per month. Obviously, you don't collect that personally, but the services that you performed, the practices receive $30,000 for you a month or something like that. Or the RVUs that you generate are, there's tons of national averages out there as far as what's normal productivity for a nurse practitioner. You can find that information pretty easily nowadays. So if you can identify how the practice looks at what is above average productivity, then you're going to have the goal to reach for it. Now, there are many times where the practice is responsible for the nurse practitioner's lack of productivity. And what do I mean by that? Well, if they're inefficient in rooming the patients, the MAs or RNs or whoever's doing the H&Ps normally are slow. If the front office is just bad at managing workflow, if the volume simply isn't there, meaning the practice does a poor job of marketing and there's just not enough patients to sustain. Those are things that are completely outside of the control of the NP, and there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, you can bring it up to the management, but it's going to be up to them to make those types of changes. So that's another thing that you should identify prior to signing a contract. Ask them those questions. What's the workflow like? Is the practice efficient in rooming the patients? How many encounters do most of the current providers have per day? That's a really good gauge for almost anything. So if the NPs are expected to see, let's say 30 patients a day, and everyone is averaging 30 patients a day, then obviously this is a very busy practice. And if they're able to get to 30 patients a day, then it most likely means that the practice is efficient in a number of aspects. If you have, you're an FMP and the practice is seeing 15 patients a day, that's a red flag. Either the volume isn't there or the practice is inefficient, right? So you want to make sure that you avoid jobs like that. And so it's not uncouth or unreasonable to ask questions about the volume of the practice prior to accepting a job. These are like absolute things that you should know before accepting a position. What you don't want to do is sign a contract. It's going to include a non-compete. The practice is just poorly run, and then either they terminate you or you decide to leave, and then you have a non-compete that lasts for a year or two, and you're stuck. So trying to figure out the volume and then productivity expectations prior to signing the contract will really hopefully avoid a lot of headaches for the nurse practitioner. So anyway, if you have any questions about employment contract, compensation structure, or independent contractor agreements, feel free to contact my law firm at the phone number and website listed below in the description, and hopefully that's helpful. All right, appreciate you watching the video. Take care.